Hello, everyone. Welcome to 444 Foxtrot. My name is Don Everett Smith Jr., and I am your host. And once again, we are with our storyteller, my father, Don Everett Smith Sr. Dad, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. Can't complain.
That's good. Today, we wanted to continue with that story and the driving force behind you getting into aircraft and all kinds of other things. And you were talking about the story again. Why don't we go back and just explain what was going on? It was October of 1950. You were just 2 years old, and you have very vivid images of a plane crash that occurred at a plane show that you were at with your mom and dad. Can you real quick, briefly, just give us a couple of the facts about that?
Well, just from my memory, which is not very complete, but it was very traumatic. We saw this little red plane, and he was doing stunts, and one of his stunts was to fly inverted down the runway and cut a ribbon that was held aloft by a couple of assistants. And he would cut it with the tail of his plane, I guess, as he came by. But I can recall the ribbon very vividly because it struck me as just odd colors. It was like a metallic pink and a metallic blue, and it was wound around. So that really stuck in my mind for some reason. But when he got down the runway a bit, all of a sudden he just, bam, hit the concrete runway. And he couldn't have been more than 15 feet in the air when he just slammed into the runway, and the plane just caught fire and exploded, a huge ball of fire, one of these kaboom, whoop type things. And I remember the crash truck being there, but by the time it got there, the flames were very subdued because I think most of the fuel had burned up in that initial explosion. And it was probably just material from the plane that was burning.
Right.
And that's pretty much all I remember about the actual event, except I do remember screaming and my mom picking me up, and they hurried back to the car. But that was the end of the air show for us. They were going to have me screaming. And then for weeks afterward, I had nightmares. I woke up every night screaming for several weeks. And I have no recollection of that, but my mom told me about it when I got older. That's basically it. That's the story in a nutshell right there. But it left me terrified of anything airplane. Forget about flight. I didn't even want to get near an airplane because I'd just seen one explode, so I knew the things could blow up. So I don't want to go near one, and the idea of getting in one and flying.
That was a whole other beast.
That was just as foreign as it could be to my
way of
thinking. I couldn't understand why anybody was getting one in the first place, but that's the way it was. So that's basically my total recollection, with the exception of the absolute terror I had of any thought of flying. And even when I was a kid and I'd be out in the yard playing, or even when I was inside, back then we had the old black and white TV sets, and every time a plane got anywhere in the area, it would turn fuzzy, and I would go out and look and make sure the plane wasn't flying over our house. And if it was, I would stand there until it flew off far enough that I knew pretty sure it wasn't. If it fell out of the sky, it wouldn't fall on me.
Yeah, it wouldn't fall on your house.
Yeah.
I can imagine. I don't want to go too far in this direction because I still want to talk about the October 30th, 1950 plane crash. But obviously, I remember September 11th very vividly because I was at the time living outside New York City when it occurred. Did you sort of visceral reaction to that, or did you have this that everybody did, where it was like, oh my gosh, America's under attack, versus did it open up a bunch of personal issues?
At the very beginning, I didn't know what was going on. We'd been transferred by the company out to California at the time, and I would get up in the morning and go to the gym and do some learning, but just some fast-paced while before I went into work. And the news was on, and they had the World Trade Center. One of the buildings was smoking. Now, then they started talking about a plane hitting it, and I had known it wasn't an accident at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And along comes the second plane and smashes into the second tower. And at first I thought they were showing a replay of the first plane hitting the tower. But then I realized both buildings were smoking. And then I immediately recognized that it had to be a terrorist attack, because there's no way two airliners hit that by accident, one after the other way.
Yeah. Now, I remember seeing the second one live, because I thought that it was one of those things where the first one, there was video. It showed a tower. It showed there was off to the side, and I just went, and somebody was saying, "Is this a terrorist attack?" And I remember going, "Oh, come on, let's not open up. Probably the sun got into some helicopter pilot's eyes, and that's what happened." And then I remember actually seeing live on TV this little flying aircraft, and I thought it was a helicopter at first, hit into the side of the building, and then there was another explosion, and I went, "Oh no, yeah, something's going on." That's when I remember that. So
yeah, well, I mean, I was watching too when the second plane hit, but I thought it was a replay of the first plane.
Yeah,
until then, wait a minute, that's both buildings.
Yeah, exactly.
I just witnessed the hitting it as it was happening, and that's when I got convinced that it had to be a terrorist attack.
Yeah, same with me. The reason, again, why we bring that up is because much the same way that this will forever, like much the same when I was growing up in the 1980s, people would ask people from your generation, "Do you remember where you were when John F. Kennedy was killed?" Like there was always a question. And then now it's kind of reverse of that. "Do you remember where you were when 9/11 happened?" And that's my thing. So it's like, seems like that whole airplane crashing into towers thing has become sort of like a type of thing where like a lot of always goes back to that. There's reactions to that, the war on terror, people that were in Afghanistan, people that served in Iraq. They're all because of what happened with 9/11, which was the impetus for all of that. Right. So, but anyway, to that, going back to the original October 30th, 1950 incident, because of my background in research and because of my interest in just going, hey, I wanted to see what people have found, I actually have the article, an article from the Virginia, because this occurred in Norfolk, Virginia. I believe so. It was in the Norfolk Portsmouth area. And I wanted to kind of go with see and get you to comment on that, if you wouldn't mind doing that. Just from your perspective, like here is the historical narrative, your personal perspective on that, if I may.
My memory.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, no sense. Are you able to put it up or just kind of show? I mean, like read it, but
yeah, I can put it up. Let's see. Yeah, there we are.
Yeah, so there's, and if is interested in what I am reading, it is, and if you have an account on newspapers.com, you can go to the Ledger Star. This is October 30th, 1950 on 2028. I will say if you do a net search on, or if you do word search on Charles Bailey, that was the name of the plane, airplane pilot, and you did the date on October 30th, 1950, and kept in Virginia, that's what you would see. So real quick, I'm going to go over that. Okay.
Just real quick, the Virginian Pilot was the morning edition. Ledger Star was the evening edition of the
Oh, it was. Okay,
newspaper.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I didn't realize. Horrified airshow crowd sees pilot and crash world's tiniest airplane here. Do you remember what the airplane looked like? I
just remember it was solid red, pretty much. Gotcha. I mean, it might have had some colored trim, but mostly red. And that's the reason the 444 Foxtrot shirts are red, because it's like
right
commemoration of Charles Bailey, I think, final flight.
Yeah, I'm trying to look, and I'm trying to do a quick search for it. And there's a guys named Charles Bailey that were pilots in the 1950s. Let me see if I can put in stunt pilot. See if that comes up with anything. No, it does not. It comes up with storm air crashes pilot. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything. Sorry. All right, so this. The charred skeleton of the world's smallest acrobatic airplane is in a scrap heap in Norfolk today. Its pilot and builder is dead. 34-year-old Charles Bailey of Madison, North Carolina, put the Austin-sized airplane through its thrilling paces for the last time Sunday, but there was only horror in the finale for the some 25,000 spectators that was there. Do you know what a sized airplane is?
The only thing I can imagine is there was a small plane called the Austin I'm familiar with, or maybe they're referring to the Austin Healey car, which was a little British sports car.
Gotcha. I'm trying to see. Any idea if this were a bi-wing airplane?
Ah,
kind of like what you
question. I don't. I really don't call
right.
About the sum total of. I can tell you all about the ribbon, but about the plane itself, it was red.
Yeah. Right. All right. The climax of Norfolk's first municipal airport came early when Bailey's plane crashed on the runway, burst into flames. The accident occurred at 3:15. In less than 10 seconds, only the framework of the 11.5-foot long plane remained, and Bailey was dead. Two companions standing 30 feet apart on either side of the runway, up two bamboo poles by a small rope some 15 feet above the concrete runway. Bailey made his first pass at the opening, going south, and missed. In his second try, he came between the poles under the rope at 60 to 70 miles an hour and began a snap roll. Do you know what a snap roll is?
Yeah, it's a very fast roll of an airplane. That's a common maneuver at air.
This is a truck I have. Would it something like where it's kind of like it tries to do like a quick loop-de-loop?
Well, no. Technically, it's rolling, around in a circle, where they wings.
Oh, like this.
That'd be like point roll, but they do 8-point rolls or whatever. So the plane would actually turn in relation to the earth, like it would be the first, it would be like that. That would be the first snap. The second one would be the top down. And the third one would be like that. And then the final snap would be back to normal.
So it's basically doing a full 360.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. And it does it really quick. We have it just snaps, it moves through the maneuver really fast and pauses at each point typically.
Right.
But sometimes you see it as just a smooth, 360 barrel.
Right.
Just done very quickly.
Yeah, because what it's after he lost altitude, his right wing saw runway about 100 yards from the pole. The plane skidded another 60 feet before coming to a stop, bursting into flames. So would you think that was caused by like the fuel catching fire from like sparks coming from as it was?
Well, yeah. I mean, when you hit the ground, you cut a fuel tank, and then the wing's not making a lot of sparks, but as it started skidding the runway, there would be plenty of sparks because, the wings are aluminum and they don't spark a whole lot. You have other parts of the plane that snap, and that's all it takes is, one spark. But let me just get my
Actually, I have an old go by.
But when you do the snap roll and you do this, 180, the wings are 180 degrees or straight up and down, 90 degrees perpendicular to the runway, you're losing lift because, you have lift like this.
Right.
And you can even lift, but you can use the elevators to put the nose up.
Put it up a little bit more.
But
it's off.
I'm good at this. But when you're in this configuration, you're losing. Now, what you typically get on the rudder, and in this configuration, you do right rudder and put the nose up like this, so that you don't lose so much altitude.
Right.
And then when it goes the other way, then you put the nose up the other. It will be to the right in that case. But
right.
Just you lose lift when you
now
close to.
Let me ask this though. I don't want to put any words in anybody's mouth, But do you think where it's, hold on, let me go back. They occurred, Bailey made his first at the opening going south and missed. Do you think that could have put him in like a oh my gosh, I'm gonna look really bad? Do you catch what I mean? Like that could have, instead of him going, all right, I gotta redo it, put him in a, oh, I need to not make myself look really bad or dumb or have you. Do you think that put him in a semi self-conscious frame of mind that when he went back around, he just went too low or just overcompensated or what have you?
I have no idea. I mean, it would just be pure speculation. Something could have broken the control.
Okay.
It could have been anything. So, due to the psychological stress of some sort, it would just be a
Right.
wild guess, really. So, there's so many things that can go wrong in that maneuver. And first I've heard about the plane doing the snap roll. To me, all I recall is the fire and explosion because that was
Right.
directly in front of us. I don't even remember it skidding. It was just there and it was exploding and burning. So,
Right. Right.
it must have hit the ground further up from us and skidded and then exploded.
Right.
But that's just the way it is when you see your memory rejects everything but bits just because it is so traumatic.
Yeah, yeah, because like your memory goes, okay, we don't need to remember this holding on to
Well,
type
it's
of
it's
thing.
basically healing in
Yeah,
time, and it's erasing the parts that are really causing you the most stress. Like I say, I have such a vivid image of the ribbon and the guys that were holding it and everything. Matter of fact, they were wearing t-shirts and denim dungarees, and they had the sailors' caps, Dixie Cup caps. So I
right,
assumed
right.
for the longest time, I just assumed the air show was at one of the naval air stations in the area.
Well, I'm
And
sure that they used the Navy guys to help out with it.
well, I don't know, but a lot of people wore those Dixie Cup in the Navy because
Oh,
there,
okay.
there were just so many of them around. Pick up and wear it.
Nice.
And
Well,
of
and
course,
then
the sailors would like crazy.
right.
They'd go out drinking and they did forget their time.
That's funny. Let's go back to the article. Bailey had performed the maneuver more than 50 times before. The stunt was the last of the 10-minute series which Bailey had performed before the largest crowd ever to witness an air show here. And it was the first accident of its kind for the troop of flyers in the show. Milton Bailey, brother of the dead pilot, had to be restrained forcibly from dashing into the dashing into the wreckage in order to rescue his brother. That me hurts in all of this. That hurts. Holy cow.
Yeah.
Flames did their destruction before ambulance and police got to the scene just 200 hours away, 200 yards away. A handful of persons who ran from the announcer stand got there first. Bailey's comedy act, which led some people to believe at first that the crash might have been part of the show. In the comedy act, Haskell Denton, I think, and called for volunteer to ride in radio-controlled plane. One Sylvester Anthony, who said he was from Selma, got the chance. So he went up in a white plane, which soon lost a front wheel and seemed to develop other troubles. When Anthony was back on the ground and safe, he identified himself as Ben Huntley, another flyer in the show from Charlotte, North Carolina. I have heard of things like this happening. I mean, God help him, but Red Fox, the same thing, famous for doing that joke where he's going, Elizabeth, I'm coming. And then when he was on the show, I forget, it's called the Royal Family or something like that. He starts going like he has a heart attack, and he starts going, help, I'm having a heart attack. And they just, the world, Red Fox, Fred Sanford, just being silly. And no, he really had a heart attack. So I can understand why somebody would think like maybe they thought that he was in like some sort of fireproof suit and crashed it and then got out and waved at everyone or something like that. But when he didn't get out, people are like, oh, this is real and sad. And the thing is that when the police were only 200 yards away, I'm like, you get in a car, that's not even 10 seconds in a car, and you're there. And he was already apparently very burnt to a horrible degree. So the only thing I could think of is in this situation is that he probably went very fast. That's the only comfort you can really take in a situation like that.
Well, it's hard for me to take any comfort even today, having, with that, you just see that blast,
Yeah.
the fire, but then all the fuel, boom, at the same time.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit for me and all people that you mentioned, I have no memory. I have a memory of a crash truck being there, the
Yeah.
airport fire truck.
Yeah. Before,
and I don't know why that stuck and all that didn't, because more or less just set
well,
the
any of
pace.
that, well, and I would imagine that these things that are done in like literal heartbeats and comedy and stuff like that. Mom could have something to you at that moment. And your mom could have said, "Oh, do you want something to eat? Do you want something to drink? Do you want daddy to pick you up? Do you want me to like?" She could have said anything that could have taken your focus away from this for the briefest moments.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just that I know your brain represses traumatic events.
Yeah.
So it's probably lucky I remember just the little bits and pieces, but I do remember how terrified I was.
Yeah. And then they go back a lot of back and forth, a lot of the Daredevil. Like someone was picked up in an airplane off a top. That worked out. He succeeded on the second try. In another stunt, this one pilot picked up a handkerchief from the ground as he was hanging out on the airplane. But these Daredevil efforts were only half who had cooperated by not running out onto the field when the accident occurred, had their attention on the wreck. Workmen were fast, though, and with the assistance of the Civil Air Patrol, had the remains of the plane off the field by 3:35. So let me go back into the article, 3:15. So the accident occurred at 3:15, and this is like 20 minutes of them getting out there and cleaning everything up. Still.
So the air show was going on while they were.
Yeah. Because like to an extent, they would do that. There's a level of the show on, and also at the same time, there is a level of, we don't want 25,000 angry people coming at us or something. So let's distract them with this situation. A lot of this, to be perfectly frank, reminds me of with Owen Hart. And that really sad situation when he fell rafters. I forget what stadium it was. He fell from the rafters and he died in the ring. And the show had to continue going on. I mean, it's one of the things where it's like you literally, like, this one rule in any entertainment is must go on. And I completely get it. And it's just, like I said, it's just a crazy. Sorry.
Well, we were long gone, by the time the act's up again. I mean, immediately I'm screaming, and my mom picks me up in the car, and I don't have any recollection. I remember her picking me up, but as far as going across the parking lot or getting in the car, getting home, or ever having nightmares, I don't have any recollection of that.
Right.
What she told me later.
Now, it does say Bailey managed an airport in North Carolina, and he had a wife and child and was quote unquote wealthy, which I guess that's a good thing because it meant that his family would be taken care of. And it lists who Bailey is survived by and by his brother, Milton Madison. And it said that Bailey's taken back to Madison for burial. The Civil Aeronautics Administrator, a guy by the name of GS, who witnessed the crash, is making an official report. Just before the accident, state highway patrolmen had estimated the crowd at 25,000 people. By 4 p.m., still more spectators were present, and cars were said to have backed up 10 miles long along the highway. Last estimate was given at 4:05. Let me just go back up here. when 45,000 spectators were reported and were still backed up along the highway. Ward's Corner Lions Club, which sponsored the event for its charities, told the total receipts from the entrance fee and refreshment stands about $5,000, charge of a $2 a car, but many of the late arrivals couldn't get their cars into the airport and walk to the show and were not charged admission. Civil Air Patrol members and city police assisted in directing traffic. Sergeant Bryant, who was in charge of the detail handling traffic for the state police, said it was the worst jam I've ever seen in 9 years in Norfolk area. Cars were backed up towards Corner. So that's
Corner.
Yeah. Not exactly sure where that is. I'd have to look that up.
I know where it is, but in relation to the airport.
Yeah, they said that. Yeah. So I also wanted to mention this. I'm doing thorough something. I want to keep Charles Bailey's family for this. I did some research on them, and I will say Charles' wife, Charles' widow, second time, and she had a very good marriage, second husband, and I think she passed away in the 1980s, if I'm correct. And her kids that were mentioned, because it doesn't say that she was pregnant with the child when that happened, and both the sister went on to have very good lives. I do believe the child that was mentioned in the article passed away recently, if I'm correct. But the fact of the matter was they have really good lives, and that's all I can say on that. I mean, it wouldn't be for somebody to do research on it, but I let them have their anonymity or what have you. So that's all I say about that. Still, the whole thing is just quite sad. And what's interesting, what I hope people take away from this, that one incident that occurred with the pilot and the airplane crashing not only affected his family very deeply, but it had a very profound, probably had a very profound effect on your life.
Definitely.
And yeah, it had an effect on, and viscerally, that's had an effect on my life and David's life. And that's had an effect on the other people's lives around. So what you're seeing is that if there's one thing I hope people know is that it wasn't just this family that had that tragedy, but I'm willing to bet that 45,000 people, 10 miles of cars, that had to really play with people's heads in that incident.
Yeah, but you also, the roads in that area were not that great in 1950.
I'm just using that as
I've traveled them many times. In fact, they weren't that great in 1970.
Well, my point is that the 45,000 people that were in 10 miles worth of cars is what I'm talking about on some level had an effect on this. And then what's crazy about it is that much the same way that 9/11 happened. I mean, again, where I live in Pennsylvania, there are entire flags and buildings named for that were killed in Afghanistan and Iraq. And that's all related to what happened with 9/11.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So that's essentially what I mean with all of this. So I know this has been kind of one of our, let's say, darker episodes, heavy episode to go through this. Yeah.
And for my part, it's really interesting to hear about this other side, an event in my life that was so profound. And in fact, it led to eventually me almost killing myself in my flying lessons, which was what our previous video was all about.
Yeah.
So maybe I should put a link to that video in the end of this one.
Yeah, exactly. And what I might try and do is see if we can get a link to for this story. See if I can actually do that. And then we got in oh wait, you know what?
That would go in the comments since it's the premise.
Yep.
Or yeah.
Yep. You know what? I'm gonna do it right now, Dad, because we can't do that. I'm gonna send you the link to the story, and then you can put that in the comments when we get it. The
story that's in the newspaper.com.
Yeah.
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 So I'm sending that to you. Yeah.
Easily done.
Yep. Now I'm sending that down.
Easily
So,
done. I don't know how
yeah.
to do it, but it's easily done. Now I got to figure out how to do it. Just
But we're
thanks
having
to you.
now that, yeah, now that part. So,
I mean, it took me 3 days to make one of the subscribe buttons you talked about in a previous video, only to find out that when I go into the editor into CapCut, they already have one. You just had to click on it.
there's a word for that.
At least now I know how to make one.
Oh, there's a word for that. It goes like this. Whoops. So,
No,
anyway.
it's called, the word for that is old deteriorating brain cells. That's the proper word.
Of course it is. So,
Yeah.
well, Dad, we have hit the 38-minute mark in our time together.
Not when I hit that automatic edit button, it'll be down to like 27 instantly.
But that's okay. We hit that time again, and I do think we can put this show up online. So,
well, it's interesting, usual fun times, but it was still an interesting half hour.
Yeah, exactly.
I appreciate, learning more about what went into it. Perhaps known all of then, I wouldn't have gotten in that stupid airplane a month before your mom and I were due to be married. But anyway, that turned out all right. It was just
well, I'm here.
It was just the most terrifying moment of my life. That's all.
Right.
Other than that,
No, I can understand that. So anyway.
Yeah, it took me a while to recover from that, just so I could drive.
After that incident where you almost crashed, walking around like Newman was on Seinfeld when his truck hit that paint on the ribbons. He's just like
almost. I mean, I'm still wondering how I managed to get that thing in one piece because it took me so long to calm down after that. But at any rate. I like a leaf for quite a while.
Oh, I could imagine. So, Dad, once again, thank you so much for giving us your side. Thank you for letting me share a little bit of my perspective.
All right.
My history perspective.
Hopefully the people will join us and maybe even subscribe. One of these days, maybe we can get a group together so we can have invite some people in to pull up a barrel next to the old stove.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, with that said, everyone, thank you so much for joining us for Foxtrot. My name is Don Everett Smith Jr., and I've been your host. And this is my father, the storyteller, Don Everett Smith Sr. And as always, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, share it, and please feel free to comment below. And thank you again for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.